Hey crafty people! Welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! Oh, welcome back. Today we are going to try experimenting a little bit, and it was inspired by a recent-ish video by Louisa Heinzel as part of her What If series, where she kind of experiments on camera. And the video was titled Coffee Dyed Paper with Resist Effect, and she was doing, what she did was she put different texture pastes on her paper and coffee dyed it while the paste was still wet, and she experimented with that and she got some really cool results. I'll leave a link to her videos down below. But the title of the video, Resist Effects, made me think of embossing powders and how they serve as a resist. And so I'm kind of wondering what happens if we stamp and emboss with embossing powders and then coffee dye paper. So that's our experiment for today, is we're gonna do that. And I have pulled out 3 different types. I figured I'd do one of each, coffee dye the paper, and we'll see the results, and then I may make more depending on how it turns out. All right, so I've pulled out Distress Embossing Glaze in Shaded Lilac, and I just actually got this in the mail from an order I placed with a online store that just went out of business about a month ago. But if you're not familiar with the Distress Embossing Glaze, it is translucent, so you can see the paper underneath. So I'm really not sure how coffee dyeing is going to work with that if we dunk the paper, which is what I'm going to do, because the paper underneath where we emboss will end up getting wet. So we'll see what happens. Then I've got a thing of really old red embossing powder that should be opaque, because most of your embossing powders are opaque. And that's the one difference with the Distress Embossing Glaze, is that it's translucent. And then I've got clear embossing powder, which obviously is translucent as well because you see through it. But most of your colored embossing powders, regular ones, are opaque. So I figured let's just experiment and see how that goes. I am going to grab my Misty just so I can restamp if need be, because sometimes you don't get it inky enough. And what I'm going to have to do, because I'm using my Misty, is fold my paper in half, because the Misty's not wide enough to fit the paper otherwise. So we're going to do that. And since my thought is I'm going to use these as pages in a journal, it's just I'm pre-folding them. But let's see how this goes. And I am using Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous Wildflower CMS253. And then if this works, I might try pulling out some different stamps and just experimenting with different looks. But I figure for the first round, let's just see what the different embossing powders do. That's not gonna fit there. Will fit there. All right, and I'm gonna grab my VersaMark ink pad. Do that. Set this out of the way. I'm gonna put down a clean piece of paper to catch my excess embossing powder. And I'm gonna just grab the Shaded Lilac. Let's start with that one. And sprinkle it on. Have a bunch sticking where I don't want it, like that shadow there going on. Let's see if I can get more in those spots. Nope, not enough ink there. All right, I'm gonna grab a soft brush and kind of clear up that haziness around our stamped in image. because I don't want it embossing powder everywhere. And I just brushed too much off there, of course. Okay, let me put the powder back in the jar. Close that up, and we're gonna go ahead and emboss this. Now, a couple tips before I turn on my embossing gun. This is one of those tips everybody says, and I never really pay attention to, but if you just let it heat up, it'll work. Before you bring it to your paper, it'll work a little bit faster. If you hold your paper off your work surface, the heat will be able to circulate better, and so it will emboss a little bit faster that way. And make sure you move it around, because if you stay in one spot too long, what you'll end up doing is overheating the embossing powder, and it'll sink into the paper and you'll lose the embossed effect. So let's go ahead and emboss this. There we go. That one is done, or that side is done. So yeah, once you notice it's like starts to change in its look, you want to move your heat tool away from it. You can use, if you don't have, like, this is my really old Nicole heat tool that I have had for, I don't know, at least 15 years for embossing. But if you don't have that and you just have the Ranger heated tool, this will emboss. It'll just take longer because the heat's more diffused, because you notice the opening is a lot larger on this one, which is why I picked this up purposefully for drying papers when I'm doing wet techniques, because it works better for that, whereas my heat gun works better for embossing. All right, flip it over. Let's stamp these guys. And if I sound a little out of breath, it's because I went to check on my dog and found he had escaped out of the yard. So I had to go chase him down. Thankfully, he hadn't gotten off the block yet. That dog. I think the problem is it's too humid right now in Florida, and that's why we're getting a lot of powdery stuff sticking. Now, you can get anti-static bags that are basically little like mesh bags with like, I think all it is like baby powder in them. But I do not have one. You can also use, to cut down on stuff sticking, use dryer sheets. So you can recycle your dryer sheets, but I don't have any of those handy right now either. So we'll just use the soft brush to take off most of it. So let's emboss this. All right, so we finished that one. Let's grab our next piece of paper. And let's just stick with the same stamps in here and go again. This time we'll do the red. there's the red embossing powder. And I think what I'm gonna do is stamp those same guys on with our clear, do the clear embossing powder, and then switch and do the other sides of the red and the clear off camera because my cell phone's about to die. I'm running low on juice for the recording, so. And I'm like cockeyed, aren't I? Sorry about that. All right, now my clear embossing powder I keep in a larger tub because that was when I was doing more embossing and when making cards and stuff. This is one of the ones that I used the most. And so I moved it into a bigger container because that just makes it easier to use. Also, you don't necessarily have to have all the colors if you've got clear embossing powder, because if you stamp in a colored ink instead of VersaMark, you'll get embossed in the color. The effect's slightly different than using a colored, but not significantly. So if all you've got is clear, pull out your colored inks and stamp with those. Preferably a pigment ink because it has more open time. It takes longer for a pigment ink to dry than a dye-based ink, so it gives you more time to apply your embossing powder. All right, I don't know how well this is showing up on camera. But there you go. That's what the clear embossing looks like. So I am gonna off camera go ahead and do the other side of the clear and the red, and then coffee dye them. And what I do when I do my coffee dyeing is I've got a container that's big enough to fit a whole sheet of paper in it. That I'll fill with the coffee, and I will just dunk the paper in, make sure it's fully covered, and then lay it outside on a towel to dry. And once everything is dry, I'll come back and show you what we got. So I did off camera another one using I stamped with the Versafine Clair in Purple Delight and then embossed with clear embossing powder. So I wanted to show you what that one looked like before I coffee dyed everybody. And I think I got slightly better coverage with the stamping with Versafine Clair and using clear embossing powder than I did with the red embossing powder, but that may have just been a factor of not inking these enough with the VersaMark ink. So we've got that one, our Distress Embossing Glaze, and then our clear one. So I am going to dunk these in some coffee and let them dry, and then I will show you what happens after that. Okay, so I just wanted to pop on and show you this before I did a second round of dyeing because I think it needs a darker coffee dye, although I noticed on the camera the flowers are definitely showing up better than they are in real life. But yeah, I am going to do another round of coffee dyeing because I think if my coffee dye was a little darker, the embossed flowers would pop a little bit more. So I'm going to do that, and once this is dry, come back and show you all of the results I got from our embossed stamping and coffee dyeing. Okay, so I dyed this paper again, so it's a little bit darker. Still not quite as dark as I was hoping for. Plus, and this was my bad. I was thinking the flower was going to be more white, forgetting that because I was dyeing the paper, the back of the page was going to get coffee dyed, so that would end up showing through the embossing. So to get the look I want, I probably should have used a white embossing powder, and I may go back at some point and give that a try. But yeah, the clear embossing powder, meh. And actually, let's do these guys first. The embossing glaze, it's okay. I don't know that it's any different than if I had just taken piece of coffee dyed paper and stamped and done the embossing glaze on top. The same with the red. I didn't find that didn't do anything particularly interesting doing it with the red. However, with the clear embossing powder on the Versafine Clair, what it did do was the embossing powder, like, I think pushed in resisting the coffee so that it created like the shadowy outline around the flowers, and I really liked that, but I didn't love, like, there was pools of coffee on this one. So I went back and did a few more, and I made sure there was no coffee pools. And this was actually with the darker mix of coffee and some espresso for these guys. And I've got a dog who wants to come in, so I'm gonna need to do that. But I really like how, and let's come in and make sure we've wiped the coffee off the embossing, how it like creates the shadowy effect around the stamping. So I did that one, and that one, and a pink one, and I have a yellow one somewhere. I don't know the yellow one. Hold on, let me get that. Apparently, I also did orange, which that I think may need some orange, and then the yellow. I don't have a Versafine Clair in yellow, so I used the Distress Oxide, and I don't think that worked as well as the Versafine Clair. In fact, it looks like a little bit of the color over here might have bled, which is fine. So yeah, I don't know what it is about the embossed Versafine Clair that gives me the effect of this, because theoretically, if it's just because of the resisting, this should have done the same thing, but it didn't. And the embossed Distress Oxide didn't do it. And it didn't do it with the embossed glaze, or really with just the clear embossing powder with VersaMark. A little bit. You get a little bit around the edges. But with the Versafine Clair, for some reason, when you emboss that with clear embossing powder, and that's the exact same embossing powder I used on this one and this one, you get this really cool effect. So I think I may try this again with some different stamps. I was thinking I've got the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous doily stamp, and to do like a whole background page with that in one of the Versafine Clair colors, and then coffee dye that, or doing down like the edge of the page with, I've got the, I think it's crocheted trim stamp. That would look really cool, I think. So yeah, apparently if you've got Versafine Clair and clear embossing powder, you can get a cool effect. Otherwise, it just ends up looking like you've stamped and embossed on some coffee dye paper. Like, I don't know that you would see a difference between these papers and one where you did it after the dyeing process, but this is a cool effect. This was what I was kind of hoping to get, some kind of cool effect from the stamping resisting. And on the inside, you've got, that's kind of cool on your other side, the look you get from those. And I don't know that it did that. Let's see. It did it to some degree on all, like, see, even then, it's, I think you're seeing the stamping through the paper, not like this cool effect that you get from doing it with Versafine Clair. So, fun little experiment. Definitely gonna do some more with the Versafine Clair, because I think that is kind of cool looking and a little bit different, and why not? But yeah, that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.